Greetings, booktubers, and welcome back to Grammaticus Books. And today we're talking about the book Deus Lo Volt, A Chronicle of the Crusades, written by Evan S. Connell, a best-selling author, and published in the year 2000. It is a historical fiction novel, and I'm going to put historical fiction in air quotes, and I'll get back to that, covering the first 200 years of the Crusades, from 1095, when Pope Urban II launches the First Crusade, up until King Louis of France's participation in it, roughly 200 years after that 1095 date. And the reason that I call it historical fiction in air quotes is because this book is just a straight up history book. It's a straight up history book, but one where Evan S. Connell, the author, has taken a very novel approach to how he's writing this history. It's a very ambitious approach. It's a very audacious approach to it. And that approach is he's writing these 200 years of history of the Crusades from the perspective of a medieval chronicler, just as if you had picked up one of these old medieval chronicles and you were reading it here today in the year 2025. And it's a fantastic idea. When I heard about this book and the manner in which it was written, it absolutely hooked me in. And I was like, I've got to read this book. And I finished it up here. So I'm going to give you my opinions on it here today on the channel. And I'm going to let you know, was his plan successful? Was this ambitious plan a success or was it a failure? And the answer to that question is, it was a success. It was a resounding success, but by being successful, it failed. Now, what do I mean by that? Let me explain that a little bit. It's a great plan. It's a plan that in your head, it sounds good. When you're putting it down on paper, it sounds great. I'm going to write this book in the tone and tenor of a medieval chronicle, like the Chronicle of 754, which is probably one of the most famous, if not the most famous medieval chronicle. But by doing so, when you're executing that in a novel here in the year 2025, that plan has flaws that are inherent in it, that are just baked into the DNA of that plan, that if you execute it perfectly according to that plan, it's going to fail when it hits the real world. And that is exactly what happens here on Deus Lo Volt. Deus Lo Volt, if I didn't mention it, in English that just translates to God wills it, which was the rallying cry of the Crusaders throughout the Crusades. Speaking of which, I got my two Templar Crusaders over here keeping me company through this video. But Evan S. Connell, he gets this audacious plan. He executes it. He nails it. He gets the tone and tenor and that perspective of speaking in that archaic voice that you're going to get in the Chronicles 754 and these other medieval chronicles. And he gets it perfectly right, exactly right, and it dooms his book. It dooms his book. It gives his book two fatal flaws. And the first fatal flaw is from a historical perspective. And the reason that it fails from a historical perspective is because by mimicking that voice so perfectly, you don't get any of the historical detail, any of the historical facts that a modern reader wants out of a history book. Instead, you get the facts that an old chronicler, a medieval chronicler, would have thought were important. And to a medieval chronicler, the only things that were important were who are the major personalities involved, who are the kings, the queens, the generals, the dukes, who were involved in this incident, what was the incident, what was the date that it took place, and what was the outcome of that incident. And you're just getting this 10,000-foot overview of all of these events of the first 200 years of the Crusade related in chronological order. And that is the first 360 pages of this book until you get to the part where the narrator of this book that he's created, this fictional narrator, Jean de Joinville, where he becomes personally involved in the story. And that's where King Louis of France comes in. It gets a little bit better there. You get a little bit less of that tone. It becomes a little bit more personal, but not much, because he still maintains that same tone and tenor and narrative voice of these ancient medieval chronicles. So Jean de Joinville, his fictional narrator here, he's the seneschal to King Louis of France. That just means a steward of the house to King Louis, and he's the author here of the book. And because he's a fictional character, that's why this book gets filed as historical fiction rather than just straight up history, when in fact it is just straight up history. So it fails on that historical level. You don't get that level of detail that you want. He can't go into the archaeological evidence. He can't go into the arms and armor of the combatants that are involved between the Saracens and the Franks and the other Crusaders and their battle tactics and how the terrain affected it all. Because if he did so, it would break the fourth wall and he wouldn't be seeing it through the eyes of a medieval chronicler anymore, and it would break the book. But by accomplishing it, by keeping that voice and hitting that nail right on the head and just achieving his goal, he fails this book from a historical perspective. You don't get the historical detail that you want. And that brings us to the second problem that you got here in this book, and that is an entertainment perspective. Because he's writing in that narrative voice of a medieval chronicler, you don't have a personality that you can attach to. You don't have any character development. You don't have anybody to draw you into the story, like Bernard Cornwell writing about the Napoleonic Wars, where he has his fictional character, Richard Sharp, and he uses Richard Sharp to put you right into these Napoleonic battles. So as he's inundating you with all of this historical information on these Napoleonic campaigns, you're there on the battlefield with Richard Sharp, smelling the acrid tang of the gun smoke as the bullets are whizzing past your head. And it makes it fascinating. It draws you into the story. And you have none of that here in Deus Lo Volt because it's being written in that archaic medieval voice. And I'm going to give you an example of what that voice is like. And I'm just making this up. This isn't in the book, but it is very close to what you're getting for tone and tenor of these passages relating these historical events. So here we go. And on July 7th, in the year of our Lord 1098, the army of the Franks approached the city of Jerusalem and surrounded it, laying siege to the city for 5 days and 5 nights. But unbeknownst to the Franks, on the night of the 4th day of the siege, the Saracen general Akbar, leading a troop of cavalry, went around through the foothills into the rear of the Frankish army. And as dawn broke on the day of the 5th morning of the siege, the Saracen cavalry charged down into the rear of the Franks, slaying many and putting the rest to flight. The commander of the Franks, Sir William Joffrey, was captured and beheaded by Akbar, and his head was put into a jar of olive oil and sent to the King of France. And so ended the first siege of the city of Jerusalem. Now, I just made all that up. It's not true at all, but that is exactly how the writing is. That's the exact writing style that Evan S. Connell gives you here. And it's the exact style of these medieval chronicles, such as the Chronicle 754, which is an enormously important historical document. And he gets it exactly right, but by doing so, you don't get anything out of it. And he just sets these up in chronological order, just like I related to you, and then you move on to the next event, and the next event, and the next event for 360 pages. It is very much like a 360 slide medieval PowerPoint presentation for the first 200 years of the history of the Crusades, and it is death by medieval PowerPoint. It is dry almost beyond measure. It's dry to the point where it's like French toast without the syrup. It's just dry, and it just becomes very tedious very quickly trying to read your way through this book, Deus Lo Volt. It becomes an exercise in tedium ad nauseum. And because he succeeded so wildly in hitting the tone and tenor of a medieval chronicler, it wound up causing the book to fail, and fail pretty badly. I do not recommend this book. It will bore you to tears, and I would advise you to just pass it by and go to a different book on medieval history, especially if you're looking for something on the Crusades. Speaking of which, here are 3 good options for you. This one is The Crusades in the Holy Land. This is more of an academic book. It's geared towards academia. It is very crunchy. It is very dense on those details, if you're interested in details. Another one is The Templars by Dan Jones. Dan Jones. This is a good book. I recommend this one as well. It's a solid Crusader book. And of the 3, the one that I like best here is Dungeon, Fire, and Sword. This is a very enjoyable book, and it is just loaded with all kinds of facts and details. It will not disappoint you. But that's my review of Deus Lo Volt. If you've read Deus Lo Volt, did you find it as tedious as I did? Did you find it an exercise in tedium ad nauseum? Let me know what you thought about it down in the comments section. And there are thousands, literally thousands of books written on the Crusades. If you have a good book on the Crusades, a good history book on the Crusades, whether it's a straight up history or if it's a historical fictional novel, put it down in the comments section. Let me know. I would like to hear what some of your guys' thoughts are on good books to read about the Crusades. And that's it. With that, I'm going to wrap this one up, and I'm going to say take care, be safe, and I will catch you guys next time.